The ancient blade rested in the center of the Hall of Trials, embedded in a stone that had not been moved in 10,000 cycles. Its hilt, wrapped in faded leather, gleamed under the dim light of the 3 moons shining through the temple's shattered dome. The air hummed with forgotten power, and the gathered aliens, warriors, scholars, and champions of a dozen species, watched in silence as yet another challenger stepped forward. This one was a Vorthax, a towering being with 4 muscular arms and armored plates covering its body. It gripped the hilt with 2 hands, bracing the other 2 against the stone, and pulled with all its might. The blade did not move. Not even a tremor. The Vorthax snarled, veins bulging, before finally releasing the weapon with a frustrated roar. The crowd murmured in disappointment. For days, the mightiest of the galaxy had tried and failed. The Krell, with their hydraulic-enhanced limbs, could not budge it. The Etherians, who wielded energy like breath, found their powers useless. Even the mechanical strength of the cybernetic syndicate proved insufficient. The blade remained unmoved, as if laughing at their efforts. Then, a small figure stepped forward. The aliens turned, their many eyes blinking in confusion. It was a human, one of the newer species to join the galactic community. Smaller, weaker, with no natural armor or enhanced strength. A few scoffed. Others whispered in pity. The human ignored them, studying the blade with quiet focus. With no ceremony, the human wrapped both hands around the hilt. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the stone cracked. The blade shifted, then slid free with a sound like thunder. Light erupted from the metal, illuminating the temple in gold and blue. The human held it aloft, not straining, not struggling, as if the weapon had been waiting for them all along. Silence fell. Then, from the shadows, the ancient guardian of the temple spoke for the first time in millennia. Only the worthy may wield the blade of eternity. The aliens stared, stunned. The human simply smiled. The guardian emerged from the darkness, its form shifting like smoke before solidifying into a towering figure clad in armor older than civilizations. Its eyes burned with an eerie glow as it studied the human, who still held the blade effortlessly. The weapon pulsed with energy, as though alive, resonating with something deep within its new wielder. The aliens stepped back, some in awe, others in fear. The Vorthax who had failed earlier clenched its fists, mandibles twitching in frustration. "This makes no sense," it growled. "Humans are weak. Their bones break easily. Their flesh is soft. How could one of them succeed where the strongest of us failed?" The Guardian turned its gaze upon the Vorthax. "Strength is not measured in muscle or machine," it intoned. "The blade of eternity does not yield to force. It answers to will." The human, still gripping the weapon, looked down at it curiously. The metal shimmered, reacting to their touch. It felt familiar. Like something they had held before, in a dream or another life. A slender ethereal floated forward, its translucent body rippling with restrained energy. "If the human is truly worthy, then let it prove it," it said, voice echoing like wind chimes. "The trials of the ancients are not yet complete." The Guardian nodded. "The second trial awaits. Beyond this hall lies the path of echoes. Only those who understand the past may walk it without faltering." The human took a deep breath and stepped forward. The blade hummed in their grip, as if urging them onward. The crowd of aliens hesitated, then followed at a distance, murmuring among themselves. None had expected this. None had prepared for a human to be the chosen one. The path of echoes was a narrow bridge suspended over an endless abyss. The stones were worn smooth, carved with symbols no living being could read. As the human set foot upon it, the air shimmered, and whispers filled the chamber, voices of those who had walked this path before, their memories embedded in the very rock. The Vorthax tried to follow but recoiled as soon as its foot touched the bridge. "It burns," it hissed, shaking its massive limbs. The ethereal attempted next, only to freeze mid-step, its form flickering as if caught in a storm. The echoes, they are too loud, it whispered before retreating. But the human walked on. The whispers did not hurt them. Instead, they sounded like distant songs, like half-remembered stories. The blade in their hand glowed brighter with each step, guiding them forward. At the far end of the bridge stood a second guardian, identical to the first. It raised a hand, and the whispers ceased. "You hear them," it said, not as a question but as a fact. The human nodded. "I understand them. Not the words, but the feeling." The guardian inclined its head. "The second trial is past. The blade has chosen well." Behind them, the aliens watched in stunned silence. The human was succeeding where they had failed. Again. And the trials were not over yet. The second guardian stepped aside, revealing a vast chamber beyond the bridge. Its walls were lined with towering statues, figures frozen in time, their faces worn smooth by ages of silence. At the center stood an altar, upon which rested a single, unlit brazier. "The trial of fire," the guardian announced. "To wield the blade of eternity is to bear the weight of its purpose. Light the flame, and the path forward shall be revealed." The human approached the altar, the blade still humming softly in their grip. The aliens lingered at the entrance, none daring to cross the bridge after witnessing its effects. Only the human had walked it unharmed. Only the human now stood before this new challenge. The ethereal hovered at the edge, its luminous form flickering with curiosity. "Fire is but energy," it mused. Yet the ancients would not make this trial so simple. The human studied the brazier. No fuel, no spark, just cold, dark metal. They reached out, hesitated, then placed a hand upon it. Nothing happened. The Vorthax let out a derisive snort. Perhaps the human's luck has run out. But the human did not step back. Instead, they raised the blade, its edge catching the dim light. Without hesitation, they drew it across their own palm. Blood welled up, dripping onto the brazier. A hiss. A spark. Then, fire. Flames erupted, not red or orange, but a brilliant blue-white, roaring to life as if starved for centuries. The heat was immense, yet it did not scorch the human. Instead, it curled around them like an old friend. The statues lining the walls seemed to shudder, their stone eyes flickering with reflected light. The guardian's voice echoed through the chamber. "Blood and sacrifice. The fire answers not to strength, but to willingness." The human clenched their bleeding hand, watching as the flames danced higher. The wound stung, but the pain was distant, unimportant. The fire was alive. It knew them. Beyond the brazier, a hidden door groaned open, revealing a descending staircase carved into the rock. A cold wind rushed up from below, carrying whispers of something ancient, something waiting. The aliens shifted uneasily. The cybernetic syndicate's representative, a being more machine than flesh, whirred in disapproval. "This is illogical. A blade that chooses its wielder? Trials that defy reason? What kind of weapon demands such tests?" The guardian turned its glowing eyes upon the machine. Not a weapon. A key. The human, still holding the burning blade, looked down into the darkness. Whatever lay below, it called to them. Not in words, but in something deeper, a pull in their chest, a certainty that this was where they were meant to be. They took the first step down. The aliens did not follow. The staircase spiraled deep into the earth, the blue firelight from the blade casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air grew colder, thick with the weight of ages. Strange carvings lined the stone, figures locked in battle, stars collapsing, civilizations rising and falling in endless cycles. The human traced a hand along the markings, the metal of the blade warming against their palm as if reacting to the ancient stories. At the bottom of the stairs lay a circular chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a single object, a weathered helm, its surface etched with the same forgotten language as the blade. The moment the human stepped into the room, the ground trembled. From the shadows, a third guardian emerged, this one different from the others. Its form was less solid, shifting between shapes, a warrior, a scholar, a child, an elder. Its voice, when it spoke, was a chorus of countless whispers. The final trial. To wear the crown of memories is to know the burden of time. The human approached the pedestal. The helm was plain, unadorned, yet it radiated power. They could feel it even before touching it, a pressure in their skull, a whisper at the edge of hearing. Behind them, a scuffle of footsteps. The aliens had finally gathered the courage to descend, though they lingered at the chamber's edge, watching warily. The Vorthax crossed its arms. Go on then, human. Put it on. Let us see if you are truly worthy, or if you will collapse under the weight of whatever madness lies within. The human exhaled, then lifted the helm. The moment it touched their head, the world dissolved. They were no longer in the chamber. They stood on a battlefield beneath a bleeding sky, surrounded by warriors wielding blades of light. They felt the heat of a dying star against their skin as they charged into a tide of shadows. They heard the screams of the fallen, the roar of empires crumbling. They were in a library older than time, transcribing knowledge onto indestructible metal, knowing it would outlive them. They were a child, looking up at a sky full of unfamiliar stars, whispering a promise to something greater than themselves. They were. Gasping, the humans staggered back, the helm falling from their grip. Their knees hit the ground as the memories, not theirs, and yet somehow theirs, receded like a tide. Sweat dripped from their brow. Their hands shook. The guardian loomed over them. You saw. The human swallowed hard. I saw everything. And yet you stand. The aliens were silent. Even the Vorthax had no taunt ready. The human looked up, meeting the guardian's gaze. This isn't just a weapon. It's a legacy. The guardian inclined its head. And now it is yours. The blade flared in their hand, its light filling the chamber. The carvings on the walls ignited with the same glow, revealing a final door, one that led not deeper into the earth, but upward. Toward the surface. Toward the future. The human stood, sheathing the blade at their side. The trials were over. The real journey was about to begin. The door led to a hidden passage that wound upward through the temple, emerging at last into the open air. The 3 moons still hung heavy in the sky, their pale light bathing the ruins in silver. The human stepped forward, the blade of eternity resting easily at their hip, its presence like a second heartbeat. Behind them, the aliens hesitated at the threshold. None had dared follow too closely after witnessing the human endure the crown of memories. Even the proudest among them had been humbled into silence. The ethereal drifted forward, its luminous form flickering. What did you see? It asked, voice hushed. The human didn't answer immediately. Their eyes were distant, still half lost in the weight of the visions. A cycle, they said at last. A war that never ended. A duty passed down again and again. The Vorthax bristled. Speak plainly. What is this blade for? Before the human could respond, the ground trembled. Not the deep, ancient shudder of the temple, but something sharper, closer. A shadow passed over the moons. Then another. Ships. The aliens tensed, recognition flashing across their faces. The cybernetic syndicate's representative let out a mechanical hiss. The Devourers. The word sent a ripple of fear through the group. The Devourers were a scourge, a species that consumed worlds, leaving only husks behind. They had been silent for centuries, long enough that some had dared hope they were gone forever. But they were here. Now. And they were descending. The human's grip tightened on the blade. It pulsed in response, warmth spreading up their arm. The Guardians had spoken of trials, of worthiness, but they had not mentioned this. The first ship touched down in the valley beyond the ruins, its hull black and jagged, like a wound in the night. From its belly, figures emerged, tall, skeletal, their movements too smooth, too precise. The Vorthax snarled, already turning. "We must retreat. Warn the systems. This is beyond any one blade." But the human didn't move. The ethereal hesitated. "You cannot mean to face them alone." The human exhaled, slow and steady. The blade hummed, and in its sound, they heard the echoes of all those who had carried it before. Warriors. Scholars. Sacrifices. They were none of those things. They were just a human. But the blade had chosen them anyway. "Go," they said. Then they walked forward, toward the descending dark. The aliens watched, caught between disbelief and something almost like awe. The human was small. Fragile. Alone. And yet. The blade of eternity ignited in their hand, its light cutting through the night like a star. The devourers paused. For the first time in millennia, something in the universe hesitated. The human raised the blade. And the night burned. The blade of eternity blazed in the human's grip, its light searing through the darkness like a comet. The devourers, tall, skeletal figures wrapped in shadows, halted their advance. For the first time in their long, hungry existence, they hesitated. The human took another step forward. The ground beneath their feet hummed, resonating with the energy of the blade. The air crackled, charged with something older than the stars. One of the devourers lunged, its clawed fingers slicing through the air with terrifying speed. The human moved without thought, the blade guiding their hand. Metal met shadow, and the devourer screamed. Its form unraveled like smoke in the wind, dissipating into nothingness. The aliens, still standing at the temple's edge, watched in stunned silence. The Vorthax's mandibles twitched. Impossible. But the human didn't stop. They advanced, the blade carving arcs of light through the night. Each strike felled another devourer, their unnatural forms unable to withstand the weapon's ancient power. The human moved with a certainty they had never known, as if the blade's memories had become their own. They fought like 100 warriors, like 1,000, like every soul who had ever carried this weapon before them. The devourers recoiled. Their ships, hovering like vultures overhead, shuddered as if in pain. Then, a voice. It came not from the devourers, but from the blade itself, vibrating through the human's bones. "Finish it." The human understood. This was why the blade had chosen them. Not for strength, not for power, but for the will to stand when others would flee. To act when others would hesitate. They raised the blade of eternity high, its light piercing the sky. The beam struck the largest of the devourer ships, and for a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then the ship shattered. The explosion rippled outward, consuming the other vessels in a chain reaction of blinding light. The devourers still on the ground wailed as their forms dissolved, their connection to the hive mind severed. And then. Silence. The human stood amidst the ruins, breathing hard, the blade's glow slowly dimming. The air smelled of ozone and something older, something clean. The devourers were gone. Behind them, the aliens finally stirred. The ethereal floated forward, its light pulsing softly. You destroyed them." The human turned, exhaustion and exhilaration warring in their veins. The blade felt lighter now, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the Guardian's words echoed in their mind. A key. This wasn't over. The Vorthax stepped forward, its earlier arrogance replaced by something grudgingly like respect. "What now?" The human looked down at the blade, then out at the horizon, where the first hints of dawn painted the sky. Now, they said, we prepare. The dawn broke over the ruins, painting the shattered temple in hues of gold and crimson. The air, once heavy with the weight of ancient trials and lurking dread, now felt lighter, cleansed. The humans stood at the edge of the valley, the blade of eternity resting at their side, its glow reduced to a quiet ember. The aliens gathered behind them, no longer hesitant, no longer doubting. The ethereal's form shimmered with subdued awe. The devourers are gone, it murmured. But for how long? The human didn't answer immediately. Their gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the last remnants of the devourer's ships had dissolved into nothingness. The blade had shown them more than just memories, it had shown them purpose. It wasn't just about destroying them, the human said at last. It was about waking something up. The Vorthax frowned. Waking what? Before the human could respond, the ground trembled, not violently, but softly, like the stirring of a great beast. From the ruins, light erupted. Not the blue-white fire of the blade, but something deeper, warmer. The carvings on the temple walls blazed to life, symbols twisting and rearranging themselves into a message older than language. The guardians emerged once more, their forms now translucent, fading. Their voices blended into a single, echoing whisper. The seal is broken. The gate is open. A rift split the sky above the temple, a tear in reality itself. Through it, glimpses of another place flickered, a world of towering spires and endless fields, untouched by time. The cybernetic syndicate's representative whirred in disbelief. A lost colony. One of the first worlds. The human tightened their grip on the blade. Not lost. Hidden. The devourers were the lock. The blade was the key. The ethereal drifted closer, its light stretching toward the rift as if pulled. Then this changes everything. The human nodded. The trials, the blade, the devourers, it had all been a test. A way to ensure that only the worthy could reopen the path to the first worlds, where the ancients had retreated long ago to escape the devourer's hunger. And now, the galaxy had a chance to reclaim what had been lost. The Vorthax let out a slow breath, then turned to the human. You led us here. You wielded the blade. What now? The human sheathed the weapon, its weight familiar now, like an old friend. They looked at the aliens, warriors, scholars, machines, all united, if only for this moment. Now, they said, we go forward. And with that, they took the first step toward the rift. The aliens followed. Behind them, the temple crumbled at last, its duty fulfilled. Ahead, the future waited. And the blade of eternity burned quietly, its light guiding the way. The rift pulsed like a living thing, its edges shimmering with unstable energy. The human hesitated at the threshold, the blade of eternity humming against their hip. Behind them, the aliens stood in a ragged semicircle, the Vorthax shifting its weight between armored legs, the ethereal's form flickering with nervous energy, the cybernetic syndicate's envoy calculating the rift's resonance frequencies with mechanical precision. You're certain this is wise? The ethereal's voice wavered like candlelight in wind. We don't know what preservation protocols the first worlds may have left behind. The human flexed their wounded hand, the cut from the trial of fire had scabbed over, but the blade's whispers in their mind had only grown louder since the devourer's defeat. The guardians called it a gate, not a trap. A grinding noise echoed from the ruins as the last standing column collapsed into dust. The Vorthax snarled. Staying here isn't an option. That blade cracked the planet's mantle when it fired, this whole continent will be magma by nightfall. As if to emphasize the point, the ground gave a sickening lurch. Cracks spiderwebbed across the valley floor, glowing faintly orange beneath. The human made their decision. They stepped through the rift. The transition wasn't like walking through a door, it was unfolding, the the universe itself creasing to bring distant points together. The human stomach lurched as colors inverted, as their bones momentarily forgot which way was down. Then, grass beneath their boots. Real, living grass, softer than any synth turf in the galactic colonies. They blinked against golden sunlight. The sky here was a blue so deep it hurt to look at, dotted with slow-moving clouds. Before them stretched the spires they'd glimpsed through the rift, but no recording could have prepared them for the reality, structures woven from what appeared to be grown crystal, their facets refracting light into rainbows that danced across fields of alien wheat. The ethereal materialized beside them with a sound like shattering glass. The atmospheric composition is, oh. Its glow dimmed to a odd shimmer. It's perfect. Not just breathable, but optimal. One by one, the others stumbled through. The cybernetic syndicate's envoy immediately began scanning, its ocular implants whirring. No defensive systems detected. No energy signatures beyond ambient solar. But it rotated slowly. The structures are intact. No decay. This place has been waiting. The human touched the nearest spire. The crystal warmed at their contact, responding to the blade's proximity. Somewhere deep in the structure, lights kindled to life. The vortex stiffened. Movement. Northwest. They turned as one. Between the spires, figures emerged, tall, slender, their skin dappled with shifting patterns that mirrored the crystal structures around them. The last descendants of the first worlds. One stepped forward, eyes reflecting the blade of eternity's glow like twin stars. When it spoke, the translation came not through language, but through the blade itself, vibrating in the human's mind. You are late. The human swallowed hard. The devourers held the gate too long. The being's gaze swept over their ragtag group, over the battered aliens, over the human's bleeding hand still wrapped around the ancient hilt. Its answering thought carried the weight of epochs. Then let us begin what was interrupted. Above them, the rift snapped shut with a sound like a universe sighing in relief. The blade of eternity flared once, not in warning, but in greeting. Somewhere in the golden fields, a bell began to ring.